We're live on the air. Back with another great episode. Today we are talking about intervals. Not just any kind of intervals though, just not any normal interval. Something that you've either done unknowingly or you may have had it prescribed to you, or you may have never done this at all. Some people might be doing this actually in workouts because they're just pacing them so poorly that they have to just go from easy to hard. But we'll get that into a little bit later. Today, we're talking about work to work intervals. Commonly, people might have heard work to rest interval, where you do a set of work, then you do a specific set of rest, or maybe a ratio or something like that. And today, we're doing work to work, which would just mean we're doing some type of work and then another type of work, and we'll get into again the specifics of it. But these are the intervals you need to be doing, and they're not your average interval. But you can't just kind of jump into it. And that's what we're going to talk about today. You could jump into it, but you can't do it without a little bit of knowledge. And we're going to give that to you so that you can maybe start prescribing them, playing with them, doing them yourself, and just have a better idea of how to improve your capacity, maybe just your proficiency on specific machines or modalities. So we're going to get into it. Work to work intervals and why you should be doing them. So don't turn off this podcast because you're going to want to hear it. Right, Sam?
Yeah, 100%.
Don't turn it off. And like and subscribe. If you like, you'll probably get more out of the podcast. And if you subscribe, I don't even want to tell you, but you'll find out.
Yeah, if you do both of those, you'll get a bonus 5-10 minutes.
Yeah,
automatically.
It's a 10% increase on your 10-minute cal assault bike.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
10% is huge.
Yeah, it's a lot.
So yeah,
okay,
we're talking about work to work intervals. When you hear work to work, because I won't lead into it too much, but what are why would you want to prescribe these? What do you think? Just broad terms. What is it? And maybe give an example. And how could it help us?
Yeah. Well, an interval in a very traditional sense would be a finite period of work where you, let's say, for example, you run for 1 minute and then you stop and there's a rest period, and then say it's a minute and then you start again. So you're doing intervals of running a minute on, minute off. Very, very simple idea. A work interval would be you run for a minute and then you walk, or you run for another minute, but at a slower pace, and then you run again. So you're continuously working. You don't stop working, but the pace is going to change. It's not the same pace the whole time. So what'll happen is you'll probably have one pace that's really slow, and you'll have one pace that's faster or less slow. And so that's what a work work-interval is. And it's very, very prevalent in the endurance world, because the golden rule of endurance training is volume. You have to build essentially as much volume as possible. And in order to build a lot of volume, a lot of it has to be really easy. So a lot of cycling, running, I'm not sure about swimming, maybe swimming, rowing. You'll see a lot of easy work that's interspersed with faster work. And that's just a very common approach to writing training, designing training, building training. And so probably for a lot of our audience who's maybe more familiar with CrossFit or training more along the lines of how you would inside of a CrossFit gym, there's a lot of work to rest intervals. And the input of like complete rest will allow for a higher power output per interval, because the fastest way to recover is to do nothing, like literally just sit still. That's the fastest way to recover after a bout of work. So anything you're doing other than just sitting still, you're let's say hindering your ability to maximize recovery. If you walk around, that's okay. We don't want to get like in the weeds here, but the point being, if you rode the bike for a minute instead of sitting still, you wouldn't recover as well as if you sat still. So with very high intensity type work, you see a lot of people working hard for 2 minutes, then resting for 2 minutes, working hard for 2 minutes, resting for 2 minutes, which is a great way of approaching training, and it has a lot of applicability. However, there's a tool that you can use that can put you in a better position for when you get back to that type of training, which would be work type intervals. So where you would do, let's say, 2 minutes of really high effort work, and then you would do 2 to 4 minutes of really easy work, and you kind of repeat that back and forth. And there are particular people who this would work really well for. So I did write that down. Maybe I'll just say it now as a starting point to give people context. So if somebody is a lot more powerful or less enduring, these types of intervals are really great for them because it teaches them how to slow down and to work just for continuous periods of time. Because usually they just have a bad sense of pace and a bad sense of being able to work for extended bouts. So people who are more powerful, less enduring. People who are recovery limited, which are usually those types of people. So people who don't recover well from intensity. So if you have a hard time doing a piece of work that's fairly hard and then recovering and doing another bout or another piece, then this style will really help improve your recoverability, is what we would call it. And then for non-competitive aspiration type people, so Gen Pop clients, this is actually a really great tool. So people who are time sensitive, let's say they can only train for 40 minutes, 30 minutes, 60 minutes. You can, and I have examples later we'll talk about, you can use this format to allow them to get way more out of their time instead of spending 10, 15 minutes worth of rest in there. Because for people who are time limited, you're going to try to maximize their time in the gym as much as possible. And so an easy way to sneak in work that doesn't significantly impede the strength or resistance training they're doing is you can do work intervals where they do a set of deadlifts and then they get on the bike for 2 minutes, really easy. They go back to their next set of deadlifts. And so they're not causing, let's say, excessive fatigue that's going to impede the deadlift, but they're getting in easy work that in the grand scheme of things for their fitness will be very helpful. And people enjoy, it's a fun format when you start playing with it. So those would be 3, let's say, avatars of people that would really benefit from this. Not to say if you were more enduring or like more fit, you couldn't benefit from this, because you actually can, because if you write them in a certain way, they can be very demanding and they can actually really challenge your recoverability. So if you have great recoverability and you're really fit, instead of passively resting, forcing somebody to rest actively could actually really challenge their ability to recover enough to get back to the same level output they had the previous set. So it can work for anyone. There's just certain people that it's really, really beneficial for than others.
Yeah. So the individual will dictate what they need. So you have a CrossFit competitor and, they are very well trained and they're super good at recovery, but it's still beneficial to them, so you might use it, or you probably still would use it. And then, you have the person you said very powerful, or maybe, just maybe comes from a power background and they're slowly learning how to pace or how to recover better. And then in general, though, it's still a good idea for our sport because it could, you could write it in a way that mimics a lot of our tests, or, there could be something specific you're working towards. Let's just say like you are games level and, you're going to be doing longer enduring events or maybe multiple modalities. Maybe it's a bike and swim or something. So it's still a good way that it mimics our sport, especially if, you're designing it, specifically for somebody. Mm-hmm. But it still depends on the person. So, like you said, it's good for everyone. Everyone could definitely gain from it within our sport, but the people who are leaning more on the powerful side might be a little better fit for it.
Yeah. I just want to give a little context on, let's say, the underlying logic here and why, like the applicability, because I could easily hear somebody retort with, well, if I want to get faster or if I want to get more fit, I should just do more work rest because I'll hold more intensity for more sets for longer, and that'll drive adaptations, and that is true in a sense. However, there's a nearsightedness to that viewpoint. We got to look more long-term and say, okay, or maybe long-term is the wrong way, but let's zoom out and look at the big picture. Like what is the foundation that we need to build such that you recover faster from that intense work and you can do more of it? Because that's what we're really wanting, is the ability to recover really fast from intensity. So this ties into, let's say, work capacity is a very general term, because that's something a lot of people want to get better at, is they want to have better work capacity. So there's kind of two big things we can think about with respect to work capacity. So the first one being a high amount of oxygen being delivered to the working muscles. So your heart has to do a really good job of pushing a lot of oxygen to your working muscles in order for you to work at a really high rate, because oxygen's the key to all this, of course. And then secondarily, we need fast recovery between bouts of hard work when oxygen demand is really high. So if you're working really hard and oxygen demand is really high, you're sending a lot of oxygen. When you stop, your system, of course, is going into now recovery mode, getting oxygen in, recovering the muscles, lowering fatigue to a degree, so that you can perform the next work bout at the same output or fairly close. So you need to be able to deliver oxygen really well, and you need to be able to recover really fast between hard efforts. Now, there's physiological adaptations that will help facilitate that, along with training adaptations. So two things come to mind. One is angiogenesis, which is more roads, more blood vessels, which will deliver more cars or blood to the working muscles, which means more blood means more oxygen, all things being equal. So that's one thing that we need. We need more angiogenesis. We need more blood to be able to be distributed to the working musculature. And the best way to do that is training volume. So training volume helps drive angiogenesis, which will help us, of course, accumulate more volume of work and more tools such that we can work at higher rates. So what I wrote here, so I'm not stepping over my words, is you can't perform 6 hours of high intensity work each week. You can perform 6 hours of easier work each week and gain the systemic adaptations you need, angiogenesis. So not to say you don't need high intensity work, you do, but the thing is you're going to run into a wall with how much you can do and how much value you're going to get out of it, when in the grand scheme, you need a lot of easy work to create these low level adaptations that are really going to set you up to work at really high rates for longer periods of time, and more importantly, recover from high work rates. So that's what we're thinking about with these work intervals, is we're trying to build the scaffolding of your physiology, of your cardiovascular system, your vascular system mainly, so that when we do get to the point where we need to be doing work rest intervals or really high effort intervals, you have the hardware to recover quickly from it. So that's just a little bit more of the underlying logic in one sense, because there's another sense as well, of like what's going on with these types of intervals and why are they helpful for us.
Yeah, a few things that you spurred my brain on were, you said we need the angiogenesis, we need more blood vessels to our muscles so we can bring more oxygen. And as you're getting stronger, your muscles are getting bigger, you're going to have to keep fueling more. So in general, this is just something important as a CrossFit, in CrossFit, that's like a pseudo strength sport and an endurance sport. It's like, we have to be getting stronger to a certain degree, but a lot of people listening to this are probably, I have to keep getting stronger. You might have to get bigger. So you're also going to have to be improving at this. And if you can improve it more efficiently, like you said, then it could be a great training tool for them. That we did a hypertrophy podcast. It's going to, it'll be live when you're listening to this. So, and we discussed that a little bit, like you're getting bigger, you have to supply more fuel, and you might not always want to be bigger. The goal is to get stronger. Won't get into too much of that, but it kind of ties back to that. And you said, if you want to increase your capacity, the O2 demand is going to be really high, because, you're doing more work in a shorter amount of time, or you're doing the same amount of work for an extended period of time. So the O2 demand goes up. And we saw this a lot in a lot of the workouts this year. In, quarterfinals, we had an interval style workout, and, it was a very fixed amount of time, and work capacity was high. You had to do a lot of reps, and you had to be able to push back and forth. And they were kind of, similar patterns back to back, and, similar muscle groups used back to back. So it kind of all is tying into something super specific that's, you need to get better at the sport in this way. And here's a great way to do it. Work to work intervals, or just increasing those, the things that work to work intervals help increase are just directly things that will help you.
Yes. increasing volume or allowing you to accumulate more training volume. And then as a byproduct, the hardware changes of your physiology becoming more efficient at allowing you to work at high rates, allowing you to work in general, and then by extension at higher rates. But yeah, that quarterfinal workout with a minute of snatches, minute of row cows, minute of step ups, 1 minute rest for 4 rounds. It was 4 rounds, right? 4 rounds.
Yeah.
So that minute of rest for elite people, that was plenty of time to recover enough of their resources that were depleted in those 3 minutes so they could keep working at a really high rate. So your recoverability was really challenged in that type of test. And if you had the hardware that you needed, that was like a perfect setup. Whereas for some people, if they didn't have the hardware set up, they weren't recovering much. Output was dropping from set to set, or round to round, if you want to call it that. And they would need a lot more rest to repeat the power. Or they just had to go easier. They couldn't push it as hard as the elite people could. The elite people could really push it, recover enough, do it again, do it again, do it again. There's some strategy in there. Like people were definitely strategizing on like, how could I approach each of these movements to maximize my output? But when you get to the top, you just see that they're all really, really pushing it. So that's a perfect example of what you need to thrive in something like that, which is great recoverability, especially when you have rest built into a test. And one way we can get there is through these work intervals. We can work on developing that characteristic. So,
yeah.
And that acts as a nice segue. Let me give some of the, some of these I've already mentioned, but just to give more clarity on the benefits. So the first benefit of these work intervals, building endurance, volume, and long-term work capacity more quickly. So if you can accumulate more volume, you will have the resources you need to then build greater work capacity over time. It's not a, what would be the term? It's not a surprise that the best endurance athletes in the world have some of the most training, or have some of the biggest training volumes on a weekly basis of anyone. Like there's a nice correlation there, and it does apply to CrossFit too. Not as closely, but there's a lot of carryover and similarity. So we got to keep that in mind. Improved recovery kinetics, which is another way of saying recoverability. So the speed at which you can recover between bouts of intensive work, that goes up, work intervals. Improve ability to maintain a higher work rate. That'll be a downstream effect. It helps improve pacing. So this is why it's really great for people who are more powerful, less enduring, or maybe less trained, who just don't have a lot of exposure to working for extended periods of time. So having people work will allow them to start developing a better sense of pace, and learning how to regulate effort more effectively. So those are some more, let's say, specific benefits of what we can get from work intervals.
Yeah, I think I've been pacing on, runs, bikes, and rowers for a long time, but introducing this style of work has definitely helped definitely make me feel more comfortable at higher work rates and pacing them, because since I've now done work to work, so let's just say I did a minute of assault bike at 70 RPMs and then 3 minutes at 50 RPMs. And I did that for 20 minutes for an example of some of the training we've been doing. Then, when I'm in a workout, let's just say it's a 20 cal assault bike and it has, some burpees in it and maybe some double unders and some power snatches, I feel a lot more comfortable. And not just that I may have already tried to hold 70 RPMs in that workout, but I feel way more comfortable, like I've done it without having to do it as much. And the comfort added motivates me a little bit more, and it makes it feel even easier. So it's kind of like the skill development of pacing, but also like I don't want to call it a skill, but like, shifting the mindset a little bit and feeling way more comfortable with doing it versus just doing like, I did 20 cal assault bike at 70, 72 RPM, and then I rested 2 minutes and just kept going, So that's one of the big takeaways I've had.
Yeah. And what you said up front, which was great, it'll come back. It's going to come back to the person, because this is, of course, a tool, and the tool is useful in certain contexts, and in others, it's not needed. So there are times when you would want a 1-to-1 work rest intervals on the bike at a really hard pace. And then there's other times when you'd want to play with something like this, because you've done a lot of 1-to-1 work rest work. And more recent, or in the last maybe couple of years, we've started playing with more work stuff, because you have a really big, robust, what would we say, tank of reps and time on the machines. So this becomes a nice alternative way to build more capacity or build your fitness on these tools without doing the same thing we've done many times over. So,
or just without extending it out another hour.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that too. Yeah, because that's part of it too. Like if you did 5 sets, or let's say you did 10 sets of a minute on, minute off, that's 20 total minutes, but you only worked for 10 minutes. Whereas if you did 5 sets of a minute on fast, a minute easy, now you're getting 20 minutes of work. So you're accumulating a lot more volume of work, which can be good, can be very helpful for some people at a certain time, without you having to do like 50 sets or 30 sets of the work. So all that to say, there's a time and place for it, but I think just most people don't do it because it's just not prevalent, and because it's actually really hard. It's so hard to work fast and then keep working, but at a slower pace. If you haven't done it before, it's very difficult. So a lot of people don't do it, and it actually, of course, decreases the intensity, which people are like drunk off of intensity. So it's not surprising that it's just maybe not common knowledge or used in a lot of training programs. So it is a good thing to play with and try, especially with the ergs first. And yeah, so that's of course why we're talking about it. So maybe
it's way harder, especially after doing years of work to rest, and not even if you've done a little bit of work to work, but like when you're going hard and you're really trying to push the envelope, which we're trying to do here, but there's still parameters around that. But you're trying to work hard and then bring it down, and as soon as you're done working hard, if you overpaced it, it's even tenfold. You want to stop so bad.
Oh yeah.
And it takes some time, but eventually, it doesn't feel good, but like you're just so much more used to it, and you can, you have a better feel of going back and forth. But like, working at a hard effort and then knowing like, oh, this is the time I stop, but you're really just still going. You'd think it would feel way easier just going right into that easy pace, but there's a little bit of a lag, especially as like, if you're doing a 20-minute total interval and you're at that, 15 to 20 minute mark, it starts to get a little difficult.
Yeah. Well, as your fitness improves, the shifting won't be as demanding, because the first few times you do it, it's very tough. But eventually, as your body's adapting, you become better, and it just through exposure too. Like you're actually learning what to expect and how it feels. You can more easily handle going back and forth between the paces, which is a really good feeling, especially like if you're running and you're able to go, you do a 5K at an easy pace, then you do 1,000 meters really fast, and you do 1,000 meters easy and 1,000 meters fast, 1,000 meters easy, 1,000 meters fast, and you get 10K total. If you can do that pretty smoothly, that you feel really good about your running and your pace and capacity. So it acts as a nice barometer for where your ability level is at with that machine or implement you're working on. So maybe we could pivot to designing it, or how you would write these things to consider, I guess, because we already kind of explained what it looks like, but there's a lot of little things to keep in mind, because you can mess up the design pretty easily here.
Yeah. Well, and then when you're thinking about this, we're trying to improve our fitness, but we're also trying to improve our ability at the sport, and running makes it easy. Like if you're in way more control of your paces, and I need to pass these few people, and I need 30 seconds at a faster pace, and then I know I can recover at X pace right after. Yeah, it definitely has helped elevate gears and myself a lot more. And from reading a lot, that's a big piece for the endurance crew, biking and rowing and long distances. They know they have a great idea of, I can hold this for this much longer, and I know this guy's going to fall off, or I know I can bait him, and then I can try and recover here. And that's obviously what you want in the sport too. It doesn't even have to be running. Like, you could be a long workout with burpees and biking or something, and you're knowing, I can push a little bit more here. I'm going to have an extra gear here. I can hold this. So you can kind of think of that too when you're listening to us discuss about, the design of it.
Yeah. And actually, I just wrote down, because I don't have it in my notes, but another great application of this is skill progression. So to give you an example, let's use a muscle up. Let's say you're working on your muscle ups and you can do, 5 unbroken. But if you did 30 for time, it would take you maybe 10 minutes or so. Like, you have a long ways to go with the developing of the skill. So initially you would, let's say, do 2 on the minute, 10 minutes, something like that. You'd build volume and you'd control the intensity, control the fatigue. And there would come a point where you're like, well, we've done now 40 muscle ups in a session. How do we progress this? How do we move this to the next level to keep elevating this skill and make it better? So one way you can do that is you do work intervals. So you would go every 2 minutes. You're going to do, let's say her, I'm thinking it's a girl, but let's say her max unbroken is like 6 or 7. So she's going to do 2 to 3 unbroken every 2 minutes for 10 rounds. And in the remaining time, she's going to do shuttle running easy, or she's going to ride the C2 bike. So it's 20 minutes of constant work, but she's doing upwards of 20 to 30 muscle ups. And by doing it that way, as opposed to her just doing an EMOM, you're contextualizing what the movement was probably going to feel like when she has to do it in a Metcon or a test. So you're beginning to get the movement to look and feel more like it ought to feel, because you don't do muscle ups fresh. You never do muscle ups fresh. You're always doing them under fatigue. So you have to start practicing that, given that you've passed the necessary steps in the progressing of the skill. You can do the movement, you can do reps, you've built reps. Okay, now let's start to move it forward. So that's a great additional tool that work intervals can be used for, is skill development and making people just keep working while they're doing the movement, but making sure that bike or that rower or that running is very, very easy, because you just have to keep moving for 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm. You could even be I would say, a fairly good runner. Maybe not in that scenario, but in general, like, if you're a fairly good runner, even the work to work, it could be such a different experience for you.
Oh yeah.
Like you've noted, and you've told me, it's like easier than it should be. Like, even if you think you're going easy, it's like at first, or especially when you're learning it, you're not gaining a huge benefit by just, by going a little bit faster. So just make it easy.
Yeah.
And learn.
Yep. Okay. So let's talk about designing. So first thing to be thinking about, which should be evident after what we've talked about thus far, need to progress someone slowly towards this style of work. It's very difficult. I'm reading my note. To keep working after you perform something hard, the easiest way to recover after hard bout of work is complete rest. So usually when I give this, I'm prescribing people paces, because people will always go either way too fast on the easy part, and then after like one set, they'll slow down a bunch and pretty much just kind of ruin it. So you're usually going to want to give people a really easy pace. And a good heuristic, if you don't know their paces, is whatever their easy pace is, add 5 to 10 seconds if it's on a rower or a skier or a C2 bike, or decrease it by 3 to 5 RPM if you're using a bike. So whatever you think it is, make it even easier, because it's especially the initial exposure, because it'll be different for people.
Yeah, you could even start with a walk, like run walk, and like it's not
walk,
if you're running at a pretty tough pace, it's hard to walk right after too. Like, you're on a runner and you're just continuing to go.
Yep. 100%. Yeah. If you were wanting to build up to the point where you could do what I mentioned earlier, where you do a 5K easy and then you go 1,000 meters fast, 1,000 meters slow, back and forth, the step before that would be run 3K easy, 500 meters fast, walk for 2 minutes, 500 meters fast, walk 2 minutes. So the walking would be a great stepping stone to getting to actual running. I've done that, and that works really well. The other machines, it's harder because you don't have like a regression like you do walking from running. So you just have to go slower. But for running specifically, you can add the walking is, you're still working even though you're walking. It's like you're working. So from from hardest or from easiest to hardest, using, because you're going to use machines. You have to use machines here, obviously, because you need something that's going to, one, you can regulate the actual intensity, because machines and running, for those that are really good runners, you can regulate intensity more tightly because you can look at the screen, you can look at the pace. You can't, actively rest doing kettlebell swings. The intensity is fixed, or burpees, or that doesn't work. So get that out of your mind. So you got to use machines. So the easiest one to use initially would be a C2 bike, because you're only using the legs. So it's the least intense of all the machines in that sense. You get great feedback. So you'd use the C2 bike as a starting point. The Echo bike would be next. Now you're using the arms and the legs. Then the rower, arms and legs, a lot more involvement of the upper body. Then the ski erg, which is arms and legs, but the arms are going to be working a lot more. So the upper body musculature is going to be, fatigue will be accumulating a lot more quickly than it would in the Echo bike or the C2 bike. And then the last would be the running. Running is going to be the hardest because you have to have a good sense of your pace, and perform. Like doing anything and running at a high effort is very hard. It's almost like the hardest combination of things, because running, you can maintain a really high work rate, really high power output. So doing that amidst other things is just very, very tough. So doing it slow as an active recovery piece is very difficult, and you have to be very capable there. So for most CrossFitters, you're probably not using running unless you're specifically trying to get better at running and you're doing that in isolation. But if you're doing things in the gym or you're doing intervals, you're probably using the Echo bike, the rower, the ski erg, because those are going to be the best tools from a transfer perspective for the local adaptations you're getting when you're doing the easy work. Because we've talked about that before. When you do zone 2 work, the adaptations you're getting are specific to the working musculature. So you want something that's using the upper body and the legs, but mainly the upper body, because most of the angiogenesis you needs to be in the upper body, because a lot of people have the legs more developed. One, because we use them all the time, and they're usually trained a lot more frequently, and they can just handle more. Whereas the upper body, not so much. So C2 bike, Echo bike, rower, skier, running.
And on 3 of those, the 2 bikes and the row, you're sitting. So it always makes it a little easier when you're sitting versus the run. I was imagining when you said like kettlebell swings and burpees, I was imagining someone doing like 100 burpees and holding 10 fast and 15 easy for 100, and trying to complete it.
No. Yeah, and I remember I forget what, this is over 10 years ago, but people were trying to do something like that. They were trying to do like easy work of
thrust. Yeah, I think Henshaw was talking about it, like doing like I can't remember. It was maybe like it was like hard biking or something, and then in your recovery, it was like 20 thrusters with a PVC pipe, and then like going like to teach your body how to. This is what they said, was to teach your body how to clear lactate better in a certain pattern. So like if you weren't clearing lactate quick enough in a thruster, then you would accumulate a lot of lactate and then do a super easy thruster in order to train your body to clear it, which in theory sounds great.
Yeah, but
does that work? I really don't think so.
No, there's better ways.
And you can't test that on Matt Fraser and say that it works, because you just can't do that.
Well, and you also you'd have to step back and go, okay, well, what are we really trying to do? Like, we're not trying to clear lactate. We're trying to improve performance. What performance are we trying to improve? Well, we're trying to improve performance on the bike. Okay, is it specific to the bike, or is it like squatting in general? You're trying to improve your knee flexion muscle endurance. Like what are we trying to really do? Because there's so like I think people just try to make it complicated or try to get in the weeds, but they're missing the forest for the trees here. Because when you say something like that, like that,
Yeah, like how good can you be at thrusters that is the most, the smallest detail possible that you could think that's what we should probably try and improve here.
yeah, no,
Like
definitely
I
not.
just don't see it working out that way.
Yeah. Okay. Well, getting back on track. So, like I mentioned, usually you're prescribing paces for people because you need to have a really good sense of an easy pace for the machines. And like I mentioned, you're going to go at much slower pace. So, a really good, like an easy litmus you can use is called the talk test. The talk test gives you a very good idea of what your lactate threshold is, which would be the upper boundary of your zone 2 pace. So the talk test is you're going to ride a machine, or you could do running, but we're not going to do running. We'll stick to the machines for right now. We'll stick to, let's say, C2 bike, Echo bike, rower. And you're going to ride at a pace where you could have a conversation fairly easily with people ongoingly, because ventilation rate tightly couples with your lactate threshold. And so at a certain point, and you use air when you speak. So if you're going a little too fast and now you're trying to talk, you're impeding the airflow, which means that you're getting above this lactate threshold pace. So the talk test is one of those really cool, simple things that is strongly correlated to your lactate threshold without you having to go to a physiology lab and getting that looked at more precisely. So ride the bike at, start easy, like 230 per kilometer, go for a few minutes, have somebody next to you, try to have a conversation. If you can do it easily, great. Drop it down maybe 5 seconds, a few more minutes, drop it down. And you'll find a point where it's like, yeah, I can talk, but it's a little bit hard. Another little thing you could do is you could do the ABCs. You could say them out loud. And if you can do it pretty easily, great, go a little faster. Once it's harder to say them consistently without taking like big exhales or a pause, then you're probably past that point. So that would be a really simple way of getting an idea of like what's the lactate threshold on this machine, which would correspond with a really easy pace. And then you're gonna go a standard deviation like slower than that. So if it is a 210 on the C2 bike, take a standard deviation back and go a little bit easier. So that would be how would you find that easy pace?
Okay, so for context, 20-minute bike, you're doing 3 minutes easy, 1 minute fast tough.
Oh, hold on. Did I cut out?
You froze. You did, yeah.
Okay, when did I pause?
You're back.
When did you? Yeah,
No, it was pretty good before, but I don't remember hearing the setup of the workout. But you described the lactate threshold. We heard that, yeah.
So you heard the talk test and everything?
Yeah, we heard that.
Okay, good. I haven't talked about number 4 yet on our little list, so that's next.
Oh, okay. That's where I thought you were. That's probably.
Oh, okay. All right. So good.
Yeah.
Then we're moving on. So we know you got to have an easy pace. We know how to get the easy pace, and we know that it's probably you need to make it easier than you think. Like create a little bit of space. You don't have to go right up to the limit on that pace. So designing this, we have I have a couple examples here. So the first example.
Hold on. Wait.
Am I cutting out?
It's you're cutting out. Just leave and come back real quick.
Okay.
He'll be right back. If you're still listening, what he was trying to describe, if you didn't hear it, I'm sure you did because I think you're hearing it on my end. But we have to establish an easy pace so we understand how to perform this work because, like we said, we're going to be performing 5 rounds of 3 minutes easy, 1 minute tough. He's back. He's here.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Jeez. Well, let me know if it gets wonky again.
No, it's not too bad. I was
Okay.
giving the layout of the workout. So we established the
Oh,
easy
great.
pace.
Yeah.
We're 3 minutes easy. We're 1 minute tough for 20 minutes. So you want to talk about the tough a little bit, the severe domain? I guess
Well,
we
let's
shouldn't
not
get
get
too
into
much
the.
into that. Yeah.
Yeah, not this episode. Another episode, we'll talk about that.
I meant like you can get into like the fast pace of the
Yeah,
workout.
sure. So yes, as a starting point, you want to have a gap between the time spent going fast and the time spent going easy. So as the example Roman mentioned, 3 minutes at easy pace, 1 minute fast, because you're gonna need, again, you're actively recovering. So you're not fully recovering. So if every time you're working hard, you're exhausting some of your finite energy, because if it's a fast pace, which again, we're not going to get into the details here, you're working at an unsustainable rate. So that means that you're going to then need to be recovering at a very easy pace, or just sitting still to recuperate enough of that resource you can do it again for multiple sets. So ensure the easy work is 2 to 4 times as long as the work time. That's a really simple rule of thumb, is a good starting point. So if you're going to work for a minute, make sure you're actively riding the bike or rower for 2 minutes or 3 minutes, just to give people enough space to handle that. Eventually, you can get down to 1 minute of working hard, 1 minute working easy. But again, you're going to have to be very specific with the paces you give people, because if the fast is too fast, they won't recover enough in the slow pace, and they'll start blowing up after 3-4 rounds, depending upon how long the intervals are. Mm-hmm. So that's one example of let's say a single modality tool where it's just the bike, 20 minutes of the bike, back and forth, back and forth. Next example would be starting to mix components. So this is something I do a lot with clients, especially in, let's say, the off season, or when we're trying to build volume or build muscle endurance, and also just volume tolerance. So this example, 20 minutes of rowing at an easy, relaxed pace. So this again would be that talk test pace. And I would give people this pace based on what that is for them. You get off at minutes 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, and you complete fast 15 kettlebell swings, 10 toes to bar, 5 bar muscle ups. So that amount of work should take about 45 seconds for, let's say, people who could do that. So that means that when they get back on the rower, they're going to have over 3 minutes of time spent on the rower going easy, which is plenty of easy work, so they can recover enough of that energy they used up when they perform those 3 movements, so that when they get off and go again, they can do it fast, unbroken, not cause too many issues. So that's an example of taking, let's say, mixed components and then utilizing the cyclical elements to allow them to work actively in between mixed work bouts. And then the last example would be one for general population clients. So this is great for any coach listening who has clients who aren't trying to compete, but wants to make their training, I would say, more enjoyable, more valuable, or fruitful. So let's say A1 is back squats, A2 is like weighted pull-ups, and then C is 5 rounds, 10 tough ring rows on the right arm, 1 minute C2 bike at an easy pace, that talk test type pace, 10-minute ring rows on the left arm, 1 minute C2 bike, 50-foot sled push tough, 1 minute C2 bike. Do that for 5 rounds. So that could take 20-ish minutes. So they're working continuously for 20 minutes. They're getting in some strength accessory work for the pulling and lower body patterns. And they're accumulating 15 minutes of easy work on the bike that they wouldn't do in isolation. And that's the other kicker that I didn't mention earlier. People need to do this stuff, but most people aren't going to do it in isolation because 1, they don't want to, 2, they don't have time, and 3, it might not be a great use of their time. So unless they have like 6 hours to train in a day, then you could plug in like Matt Fraser and do 3 hours of let's say easy cyclical activities that are helping build that the angiogenesis and the adaptations that we were talking about earlier. So, but most people don't have that. So we got to be creative with how we're going to sneak it in there to get in the volume that we need in phases of training that are asking for it.
Yeah. Yeah, we didn't. I mean, if you could think about it, you could probably there's hundreds of ways you could design this, and
Oh yeah,
just thinking of the other machines and because even if it is shorter, because a big piece we've been talking about and what you just mentioned is like you might not have the 3 hours, you might not even have like 3 hours a week additional compared to the training you're doing. So the shorter amount of time, you'd think there's still not a lot to do, but there's a lot, and there's won't go too much into it, but like front loading easy work into this type of designs, or doing other types of training mixed with it. Like you said, now we have like the row, and you're getting off and doing other stuff. You could also put in certain things you need to be working on, certain skills within that. So it doesn't just have to be the kettlebell swing toes to bar muscle up. It could you might need to get better at pistols or something.
Yeah. Okay. So that example, because I know what you're mentioning, just to give people more context. So the example I gave of the 20-minute row easy and then getting off every 4 minutes to do those 3 movements, that would be a great example of somebody who has, let's say, a grip muscle endurance limitation, or their grip just blows up easily, or they just don't have great, let's say, work capacity with pulling. That would be a perfect example of how you could give them a piece of work that starts working on developing that characteristic, because everything they're doing involves the grip. The rowing, even though it's easy, there's grip involved. Kettlebell swing, grip, toes to bar, grip, bar muscle, grip. So if they have poor recoverability with gripping and pulling, then you could give them something like that. If it was pressing that they had issues with, you could do 20 minutes at the ski erg. They get off, they do 15 push-ups, 10 dumbbell push press, and 5 strict handstand push-ups or something like that, or 5 deficit kipping handstand push-ups, something like that. So you can be very creative with what are the particular limitations this person has, where are they poor with their recoverability and work capacity, and assuming it's not like a structural thing, because like if they can't get into good positions, then giving them stuff like this might not be that helpful. Like you'd want to try to work on clearing the position first, assume they move well. Okay, now how do we improve the capacity of that pattern? Well, here's one way we could do it. And to your point, you could do it for the legs too. If the quads don't recover well, 20-minute C2 bike, get off, 15 pistols, 10 wall balls, 5 power clean and jerk at a moderate load or something like that. You could do all 3 squatting, which would be a lot, but just to give an example of how you could be creative with attacking particular patterns that need work. That's it. They need work. And a lot of it needs to be easy initially.
Yeah, I feel like that set up the 20 minutes of rowing. Every X minutes you're hopping off and performing work. So it's like 2-3 birds with one stone. You can be gaining a lot from that. It's very, you could be doing almost, I don't want to say like strength work, but almost CP limited, someone who needs to improve strength, or especially strength under fatigue and gymnastics. Like there's just so many things you could do with that style of work. And all types of people could improve or benefit from it. And the key, high and low level.
Yeah. And the key is just the principle. And the principle is work intervals. So like, that's what it is. It's just a particular way of outlining it, designing it. But that's the key takeaway is, okay, somebody has a limitation. I need to work on this. There is an element of recoverability that's lacking. Let's play with work intervals. Let's start slow. Let's make sure we give them plenty of room to navigate this, and let's take it 1 week at a time. So I think that's that'd be the big takeaway, is just coming back to the central idea of continuously working. And then if that's the goal, like how are we going to set up the training so people could do that and execute it really well?
Yeah. And if anyone remembers the durability podcast as well, I mean, there's a lot of similarities there, and probably heard a lot of overlapping things that we've talked about from both.
Yeah. The durability was because durability is another term for fatigue resistance. So And what are we trying to do here? Like we're trying to improve if because we're throwing around some terms like recoverability is what it sounds like, your ability to recover from intense efforts. Which if you can do that well, then you're probably pretty resistant to fatigue. If you don't do it well, fatigue probably has a strong grasp on you when you perform work. So that's a component of endurance that I'd say in the last 5-10 years there's been strong arguments like that's an added pillar of endurance, elite endurance performance, because you have VO2 max, you have lactate threshold, you have economy of movement, and then the fourth would be durability or fatigue resistance. So like those would be the 4 pillars of elite endurance performance. Is like you have all of those really, really good. So that durability episode, that was us working on improving people's fatigue resistance inside of, let's say, more work capacity type settings, where you're doing work intervals with front loaded easy work. So you're accumulating more fatigue on the front end and then getting into tougher work, which you kind of are doing here. Like that 20-minute row example we just went over, you're going to row for 4 minutes. You're going to row almost 1,000 meters, which is going to induce some fatigue, even if it's easy. And then you're going to get off and start working. So you could just expand that even more. An easy example would be, let's say you wanted to get better at your ring muscle ups when your grips fatigue. You could have somebody row for 10 minutes at an easy pace, then get off and perform like 30 muscle ups for time in sets of 5 directly after the 10 minutes of rowing. So you can easily play with how you lay this out to put somebody in a position to then challenge whatever this limitation might be that they have. So yeah, there's a lot you can play with this idea.
Yeah. So that should give you a pretty good idea of, why we wanted to talk about it. There's so much use. We're using it a lot now. You probably, if you follow us on the gram or on the other socials, you've probably seen some stuff similarly posted about it. And yeah, it's super effective, more time efficient. Not to say that the other work isn't important or needs to be done, but maybe you do need less time training, or you only have X amount of time training and you're trying to fit it in, or, maybe you're more advanced and this is something that can, something new that you haven't done to help you break through something, some issue you're having. But I feel like we did a pretty good job going over it, giving people, some clear advice and reasons why we like it. We didn't just like make this up or something. People in the endurance community are doing this.
They've been doing it for 50 years, 60 years.
Yeah, it kind of leads into one of our next episodes, maybe not the next one, but in the next few, we're going to discuss some stuff about a different version, or kind of like an alternate version to the zone training, which is the style of training that is used in the work-to-work intervals a lot. So that could even open up even more about, how to design the work-to-work a little more effectively, or to really understand, I would say could help you understand a lot more how to race more effectively as well. So not just train, but, compete.
Yeah. 100%.
And then I forgot earlier when you were talking about, you said, I don't know how much they do this in swimming, but I do remember growing up, and I don't know, this was probably like 15 years ago, we did have swim work to work, and this, I never would have thought of it again until you said that. But we would do like 25 meters fast and hard, and it would either be like, 75 or 100 easy. Mm-hmm. And I had a lot of overlapping sports in swimming, and so I was swimming very little, and then I was sprinting, so it probably wasn't the most effective thing for me to be doing because I couldn't really do it. So the coaches, I remember, would get, one of them specifically would get so mad at me because I would just be like hanging on the wall. I'd be like, dude, I'm not doing this. Like, I literally can't do this. And he would just like shake his head and be so mad. And then I had the assistant coach was like this 70-year-old guy that, looking back at it, he might've been just geared out, but he was extremely flexible, but huge, yoked. And he did like little CrossFit workouts on the side all the time. He was like, it's okay. You just rest of the wall. Like just get some more volume in, just swim whenever you're ready, just keep moving.
Yeah.
But
well, and that's a really great example that your easy pace wasn't easy enough for you to recuperate after the intensity. So your fast pace was really costly. And the only way you could repeat that effort is you literally had to do nothing. So
yeah, and
that's just
part of it was definitely at my efficiency. Like I was fairly efficient, but swimming slow is much different than swimming fast. I mean, they look different. And yeah, just like experience, like still I hadn't, I'd been swimming for a while, but I never swam year round really. I might do a few sessions in the pool, a couple of months during off seasons, but like I had never swam more than a few weeks in a row all the time. So, just goes to show that you still do need
a
base.
A lot of volume. Exactly. Yeah, you didn't have enough volume. So you're just to stick on the terms we're talking about, like your talk test for swimming was really, really low, like very, very slow. Not almost, it would be like just treading water. Maybe you might not.
I can't talk underwater, so it doesn't.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, like it would have been better.
The pace that coincided with your lactate threshold for swimming was too slow for you to actively do it. You had to actually sit on the wall. Whereas for your teammates, they could go back and forth because their LT was higher, so they could actively swim and recover and then go back to going fast. So
I argue they literally could talk underwater. So
they probably could.
Guys and girls on my team
were
so good. Yeah, they were incredible. One swimming in the Olympics.
Oh wow,
maybe
cool.
Two. Yeah, he was in the trials this year. I think I'm trying to remember. I don't remember if it's happened yet or not. But yeah, it just showed me how much time you had to spend in order to get to the point where you can start training it more effectively or more advanced without just having to do easy work. Because even now, I could probably more effective. I could not probably. I've done swims where I'm just a little more in control. I don't even train as much. I rarely swim, but like I understand how to go much slower. So, I'm not making a mistake either. I didn't have gears then. It was just go fast. So, there was no slow swimming.
Yeah. Well, good. Perfect.
That was good. Awesome. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening. Hopefully you got some questions for us. I would love to hear what people think about this kind of stuff or some comments. It's definitely not the CrossFit mainstream way right now, but the winners are doing it. So it's mainstream in one way. You just don't know about it. So make sure you start looking at how to do some work to work. Maybe just do some research. You can start typing in work to work running intervals on Google. Maybe type in fartlek running intervals, or just start searching it and digging it up, and you might be able to find some stuff on your own as well. But thank you again for listening. We always appreciate it. Please go like and subscribe if you made it this far. You've probably already done that, but nonetheless, just go do it again for us. Maybe boost those stats up. But thanks again, everybody. We hope you have a great day, and looking forward to seeing you guys on the next episode.